"Boy, what sewer did you crawl out of this morning?" The words cut through the morning air at Riverside County Courthouse. Bailiff Thomas Mitchell stood blocking the main entrance, arms crossed, glaring down at the well-dressed black man in the navy suit. David Richardson stopped on the marble steps. Around them, other visitors slowed their pace, heads turning toward the confrontation. Mitchell stepped closer, his badge catching the sunlight. "This courthouse is for decent people, not street trash like you." He jabbed his finger toward David's chest. "The dumpster behind the building is where you belong." A small crowd gathered, phones sliding from pockets. Mitchell's partner Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. "Look at this fool," Mitchell announced to everyone watching. "Probably stole that suit from some charity bin." His voice dripped with satisfaction as murmurs rippled through the growing audience. David maintained perfect composure, hands at his sides. Have you ever witnessed the moment when pure evil was about to meet absolute justice? 6 months earlier, FBI Director Sarah Carter had placed a classified folder on Attorney General David Richardson's desk. The label read, "Civil Rights Violations, Riverside County." 47 complaints in 6 months, Carter had explained, her voice tight with concern. All from the same courthouse, all involving the same pattern. David had flipped through the reports. Each page told the same story. Black citizens illegally searched, Hispanic families humiliated, Asian attorneys questioned about their credentials. The name Thomas Mitchell appeared on every incident report. Now, standing on those courthouse steps with Mitchell's words echoing around him, David felt the weight of every complaint. This wasn't just about one racist officer. This was about a system that had protected him for 20 years. The morning sun climbed higher as David absorbed Mitchell's insults. His mind cataloged every word, every gesture, every violation of constitutional rights happening in real time. Hidden across the street, FBI surveillance equipment captured every second through telephoto lenses. David had built his career prosecuting civil rights cases. Harvard Law School, 15 years as a federal prosecutor, countless courtrooms where he'd fought for justice. But this morning, he was just another black man being told he didn't belong. The irony wasn't lost on him. In 3 hours, he was scheduled to meet Judge Patricia Williams inside this very courthouse. They would discuss federal oversight, civil rights training, and constitutional protections. Williams had no idea her 9 a.m. appointment was currently being humiliated on her front steps. David's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his wife, Sarah. "Good luck with the courthouse inspection today. Love you." She was performing surgery at Children's Hospital, saving lives while her husband endured racial slurs. Their teenage daughter had asked him last night, "Dad, why do you have to go undercover? Can't you just walk in and fix things?" David had explained, "Sometimes, sweetheart, you have to let people show you who they really are." The courthouse loomed above them, its marble columns representing justice, equality, constitutional protection. Yet here on its steps, those principles meant nothing to Thomas Mitchell. Rodriguez, Mitchell's partner, kept glancing around nervously. David noticed his discomfort. Good officers knew wrong when they saw it. The question was whether they had courage to act. David's briefcase contained classified Department of Justice documents, federal investigation files, constitutional law briefs, evidence that would soon become crucial to the case against Mitchell. But right now, those papers might as well have been grocery lists. The crowd continued growing. Office workers heading to court, attorneys arriving for hearings, families seeking justice, all witnessing a federal official being treated like a criminal based solely on skin color. David thought about the other victims. Maria Santos, the Hispanic attorney who'd filed 3 complaints about Mitchell's behavior. Dr. James Washington, who'd been illegally searched 6 times in 2 years. Dr. Keisha Johnson, whose medical credentials Mitchell had questioned simply because she was black. Each complaint had been dismissed. Isolated incidents. Misunderstandings. Lack of evidence. The system had protected Mitchell while his victims suffered in silence. But today was different. Today, the Attorney General of the United States was experiencing firsthand what those 47 complainants had endured, and unlike them, David had the power to ensure justice would finally be served. The FBI surveillance van looked like any other utility vehicle. Inside, Agent Morrison monitored multiple camera feeds, recording everything in high definition. Every angle covered, every word documented, every constitutional violation preserved for federal court. Mitchell's behavior wasn't random. 20 years of complaints painted a clear picture: systematic racism, abuse of authority, violation of civil rights under color of law, federal crimes carrying up to 10 years in prison. David checked his watch. 8:22 a.m. In 38 minutes, Judge Williams would take the bench. In 45 minutes, she would wonder where Attorney General Richardson was for their meeting. In 50 minutes, she would discover he'd been arrested by the very officer they were investigating. The morning breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee from a nearby cafe. Normal people started normal days, unaware they were witnessing history, unaware that this moment would trigger the largest civil rights investigation in courthouse history. David straightened his shoulders and looked directly at Mitchell. 20 years of federal prosecution had taught him patience. Sometimes justice requires enduring injustice first. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was absolutely nothing at all. Mitchell stepped closer, his boots scraping against the marble steps. The morning crowd thickened as more people stopped to watch the unfolding drama. "You deaf, boy!" Mitchell's voice boomed louder. "I said you don't belong here." He poked his finger toward David's chest, stopping just inches away. "What are you, some welfare case looking for free legal aid?" David remained motionless, hands clasped behind his back. "Officer, I have legitimate business in this courthouse." "Legitimate business?" Mitchell threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing off the courthouse walls. "Listen to this clown. Probably here to contest a parking ticket and thinks he's some big-shot lawyer." The crowd murmured. Several people held up phones, recording everything. Mitchell seemed to feed off the attention, his chest puffing with pride. "Let me guess," Mitchell continued, circling David like a predator. "Child support hearing? Food stamp appeal? Or maybe you're here to see your dealer who got busted last night." Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. "Tom, maybe we should just—" "Shut it, Rodriguez," Mitchell snapped, without taking his eyes off David. "I'm conducting official business here." David's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. "I'm here for a scheduled appointment, officer." "Appointment?" Mitchell's laugh turned cruel. "Boy, the only appointment you got is with the county jail if you keep lying to me." He gestured broadly to the watching crowd. "You see this, folks? This is what happens when these people get ideas above their station." A middle-aged white woman in the crowd frowned. "Officer, this seems excessive." Mitchell whirled toward her. "Ma'am, please step back. This individual is exhibiting suspicious behavior and may be armed." David's eyes flashed. "I am not an armed officer, and I am not exhibiting suspicious behavior." "That's not your call to make, street rat," Mitchell snarled. 20 years I've been protecting this courthouse from lowlifes exactly like you." He turned back to the crowd. "You good people pay taxes so I can keep the trash out." An elderly black man in the crowd shook his head in disgust. A young Hispanic woman started typing rapidly on her phone. The scene was spreading across social media in real time. "You know what I think?" Mitchell continued, his voice rising. "I think you're casing this building, planning something, looking for wealthy lawyers to rob." He pointed at David's suit. "That jacket probably fell off a truck, or maybe you mugged some poor businessman for it." The crowd grew larger. Office workers delayed their commutes to watch. Attorneys paused on their way to hearings. The courthouse steps became an amphitheater for Mitchell's performance. "Tom," Rodriguez whispered urgently, This is getting out of hand. Out of hand? Mitchell spun around. You think protecting our community is out of hand? You think keeping criminals away from innocent people is excessive? He gestured wildly at David. Look at him, Rodriguez. Does he look like he belongs here? David maintained his composure, but inside he was cataloging every civil rights violation. False detention, racial profiling, public humiliation. Each action would become evidence in federal court. Mitchell pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Mitchell at the main entrance. I've got a potential troublemaker refusing to comply with lawful orders. Officer Mitchell, David said quietly, you have not given me any lawful orders. Lawful orders? Mitchell's face reddened. How about this for a lawful order? Tell me what you're really doing here. And don't give me any more lies about appointments. I told you the truth, officer. The truth? Mitchell's voice cracked with disbelief. The truth is, you're probably on parole and violated your terms. The truth is, you probably have warrants out for your arrest. The truth is, you saw this courthouse and thought you could scam some bleeding heart lawyer out of money. A well-dressed attorney in the crowd spoke up. Officer, I've been watching this entire interaction. This gentleman has done nothing wrong. Mitchell whirled toward the attorney. Counselor, unless you want to be charged with interfering in a police investigation, I suggest you move along. The attorney didn't back down. This is harassment, officer. Pure and simple. Harassment. Mitchell's voice rose to a shout. I'll show you harassment. He turned back to David. Turn around, hands against the wall, spread your legs. Now! The crowd gasped. Rodriguez stepped forward. Tom, you can't just... I can do whatever I damn well please, Mitchell shouted. This is my courthouse, my jurisdiction, my rules. 20 years I've been keeping the peace here, and some street thug isn't going to change that. David looked directly into Mitchell's eyes. Officer, what you're doing is illegal. Illegal? Mitchell's face contorted with fury. You're going to lecture me about the law, you piece of garbage? I've forgotten more about law enforcement than you'll ever learn living in whatever slum you crawled out of. A news van pulled up across the street. Reporter Susan Carter jumped out with her cameraman, immediately recognizing a developing story. Her producer had been monitoring police scanners and social media reports about a confrontation at the courthouse. Mitchell noticed the media attention and seemed to relish it even more. Perfect timing, he announced. Channel 7 can document how we handle troublemakers in this county. Maybe other criminals will think twice before trying to infiltrate our justice system. He grabbed David's shoulder roughly. Turn around. Now. Before I make this a lot worse for you and add resisting arrest to your charges. David complied slowly, placing his hands against the courthouse wall. The marble felt cool against his palms. Behind him, he could hear phones clicking, recording his humiliation for the world to see. Spread your legs wider, Mitchell commanded. Arms higher. Act like you've done this before because I guarantee you have. Probably got arrested more times than I can count. Mitchell began patting David down aggressively, his hands rough and invasive. What have we got here? He reached into David's jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Let's see what kind of fake ID this clown is carrying. Probably stolen from some poor victim. David's briefcase sat on the ground, legal documents scattered by the morning wind. Mitchell kicked it dismissively. Probably stolen paperwork. These types always pretend to be something they're not. Fake business cards, forged documents, stolen briefcases. Officer! The same attorney in the crowd called out. This appears to be racially motivated harassment. Mitchell spun around, his face twisted with rage. Racially motivated? I treat all criminals the same regardless of color. This has nothing to do with race and everything to do with criminal behavior. He gestured wildly at David. Look at him. Expensive suit he probably stole. Fancy briefcase full of fake documents. Coming to my courthouse trying to run some kind of scam. The attorney held up his phone. "I'm recording this entire incident for legal purposes." "Good," Mitchell shouted. "Record away. Let everyone see how we handle suspicious characters who don't know their place. Let the whole world watch real police work in action." He turned back to David, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You picked the wrong courthouse on the wrong day, boy. I'm going to make sure you remember this lesson for the rest of your miserable life." David felt Mitchell's breath on his neck. The scent of stale coffee and morning aftershave filled his nostrils. 20 years of federal prosecution experience told him to end this immediately. But 47 civil rights complaints told him to let Mitchell expose himself completely. "Empty your pockets," Mitchell ordered. "All of them. Let's see what kind of contraband you're hiding. Drugs, stolen property, weapons." David began removing items slowly. Keys, phone, business cards. Mitchell examined each item suspiciously, as if expecting to find evidence of criminal activity. "These business cards are blank," Mitchell announced to the crowd. "Probably planning to forge fake credentials." Classic criminal behavior. He tossed them on the ground dismissively. The Channel 7 cameraman zoomed in on David's face, capturing his remarkable composure under extreme provocation. Reporter Carter spoke quietly into her microphone, documenting every detail for the evening news. Mitchell pulled out his handcuffs, the metal jangling ominously in the morning air. "You know what? I think a few hours in a county lockup might teach you some respect for law enforcement and proper behavior." Rodriguez finally found his voice. "Tom, you can't arrest him. He hasn't committed any crime." "Crime?" Mitchell's eyes blazed with righteous indignation. "Failure to comply with lawful orders. Suspicious behavior. Disturbing the peace. Loitering with intent. And I don't like his attitude." He clicked the handcuffs open. "That's enough to hold him while we figure out what else he's guilty of." David turned around slowly, meeting Mitchell's gaze. "Officer Mitchell, I want you to understand something very clearly." "Oh, you want me to understand something?" Mitchell mocked. "The trash is going to educate me now? The criminal is going to teach the cop about law enforcement?" "What you're doing right now," David continued calmly, "will change your life forever." Mitchell stepped closer, his face inches from David's. "The only thing changing is your address, boy. From whatever rat hole you crawled out of to a nice cold jail cell where you belong." He grabbed David's wrist roughly, forcing it behind his back. The handcuff clicked shut with a metallic snap that seemed to echo across the courthouse steps. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mitchell announced to the watching crowd, "this is how we maintain law and order in Riverside County. This is how we protect decent citizens from predators and criminals." David felt the cold metal against his wrists and thought about the 47 other victims who had experienced Mitchell's brand of justice. But unlike them, his ordeal was about to end in a way that would shock everyone watching. In 18 minutes, Judge Patricia Williams would discover that her 9 a.m. appointment with the Attorney General had been delayed by the most ironic arrest in courthouse history. With David's hands cuffed behind his back, Mitchell paraded him toward the courthouse entrance like a trophy. The crowd followed, phones held high, capturing every moment of the spectacle. "Move it along, criminal," Mitchell commanded, shoving David forward. "Time to process you properly and find out what you're really up to." David stumbled slightly but maintained his dignity. The handcuffs cut into his wrists as Mitchell gripped his arm with unnecessary force. "Look at this, folks," Mitchell announced to the growing audience. "This is what happens when criminals think they can waltz into our courthouse and cause trouble. We don't tolerate it here in Riverside County." Reporter Susan Carter pushed through the crowd, her cameraman filming everything. "Officer Mitchell, can you tell us what charges you're filing against this individual?" Mitchell puffed his chest with pride. "Multiple charges, ma'am. Suspicious behavior, failure to comply with lawful orders, disturbing the peace, and whatever else we discover during booking." "What suspicious behavior?" Carter pressed. He was clearly casing the building, Mitchell replied confidently. Probably planning to rob lawyers or steal court documents. These types always have some criminal scheme going. David said nothing, his face a mask of calm determination. But inside he was memorizing every word, every action, every federal crime being committed against him. As they approached the metal detectors, Mitchell's fellow officers looked confused. Bailiff Jackson approached cautiously. "Tom, what's going on here?" Jackson asked. "Caught another troublemaker trying to infiltrate the courthouse," Mitchell replied smugly. "Gonna teach him some respect for law and order." Jackson glanced at David, then at the crowd of people filming. "Maybe we should talk about this privately first." "Nothing to talk about," Mitchell snapped. "I caught him red-handed being suspicious. Case closed." They passed through the metal detectors, David's keys and phone placed in a plastic tray. Mitchell made a show of examining each item as if searching for evidence of criminal activity. "Expensive phone for someone living on welfare," Mitchell muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Probably stolen like everything else he owns." The courthouse lobby echoed with footsteps and whispered conversations. Other officers watched the procession with growing unease. Word was spreading quickly through the building that Mitchell had made another questionable arrest. "Where are we taking him, Tom?" Rodriguez asked nervously. "Holding cell first," Mitchell replied. "Then we'll run his prints, check for warrants, see what kind of criminal record this piece of trash is hiding." David's briefcase remained on the courthouse steps, its contents scattered by the wind. FBI surveillance documents, classified Department of Justice memos, federal court briefs, all blowing across the marble like worthless paper. "Sir?" A young court clerk approached Mitchell hesitantly. "There's been some confusion about Judge Williams's 9 a.m. appointment." "What kind of confusion?" Mitchell asked, not breaking stride. "Well, she's expecting someone from the Department of Justice, but we can't locate them anywhere in the building." Mitchell laughed harshly. "Department of Justice? Probably some low-level clerk coming to rubber stamp whatever liberal agenda they're pushing this week." The clerk looked uncomfortable. "Actually, sir, it's supposed to be someone very high-ranking." The Attorney General himself. "Attorney General?" Mitchell scoffed. "Yeah, right. Like the Attorney General would waste his time in some podunk courthouse like this. Probably just some assistant pretending to be important." David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The irony was becoming almost unbearable. They continued down the hallway toward the holding cells. Other officers stepped aside, some shaking their heads at Mitchell's behavior, but none spoke up to stop what was clearly an illegal arrest. "You know what I think?" Mitchell continued his running commentary. "I think this whole appointment story was just his cover. He was probably planning to steal something or cause trouble, and when I caught him, he made up some lie about having business here." Rodriguez tried one more time. "Tom, maybe we should double-check his story before we—" "Double-check what?" Mitchell interrupted. "Look at him, Rodriguez. Does he look like someone who belongs in a courthouse? Does he look like someone who has legitimate business here?" The racist implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several courthouse employees exchanged uncomfortable glances but remained silent. "Besides," Mitchell continued, "even if he did have some appointment, which I seriously doubt, he was still acting suspicious, still refused to follow my orders, still showed disrespect for law enforcement." They reached the holding area. Mitchell produced a large ring of keys, selecting one for the cell door. The metal hinges creaked as it swung open. "Your luxury accommodations await," Mitchell announced sarcastically. "Hope you're comfortable, because you might be here for a while." David stepped into the cell without resistance. The space was small and cramped, with concrete walls and a metal bench. The smell of disinfectant mixed with decades of fear and desperation. "Make yourself at home, criminal," Mitchell sneered. "I'll be back after I run your prints and see what kind of rap sheet you're hiding." As Mitchell turned to leave, David spoke quietly. "Officer Mitchell." "What now?" Mitchell spun around, clearly annoyed. "I want you to remember this moment," David said calmly. "Remember exactly how you're treating me. Remember every word you've said, every action you've taken. Mitchell's face reddened. Is that some kind of threat? It's not a threat, David replied. It's advice. Because in about 15 minutes, you're going to wish you had treated me very differently. 15 minutes. Mitchell laughed mockingly. In 15 minutes, you'll still be a nobody sitting in my jail cell, and I'll still be the one with the badge and the authority. He slammed the cell door shut with a metallic clang that echoed through the holding area. The sound seemed to punctuate Mitchell's victory over another victim. Rodriguez, start the paperwork, Mitchell ordered. Book him for everything we discussed, and make sure to note his threatening behavior and uncooperative attitude. Rodriguez hesitated. Tom, I really think we should... Think? Mitchell cut him off. I'm not paying you to think, Rodriguez. I'm telling you to do your job, process the prisoner. As they walked away from the holding cells, Mitchell's radio crackled to life. All units, be advised we have a media presence at the courthouse. Channel 7 News is requesting comments on an arrest situation. Mitchell grabbed his radio eagerly. This is Mitchell. Tell Channel 7 they can interview me about proper law enforcement procedures and how we maintain security at this courthouse. Copy that, Mitchell. Also, Judge Williams is asking about the status of her 9 a.m. appointment. She says the Attorney General's office hasn't checked in yet. Mitchell rolled his eyes. Tell Her Honor that whoever she's expecting probably got lost or forgot about the meeting. These federal types aren't exactly reliable. Back in his cell, David sat quietly on the metal bench. Through the small window, he could see courthouse employees rushing around, clearly concerned about something. Phone calls were being made, supervisors were being contacted. The irony was almost poetic. 20 years of civil rights violations had led Mitchell to this moment, arresting the one person in America with the power to end his career permanently. David checked his watch. 8:47 a.m. In 13 minutes, Judge Williams would realize her appointment with the Attorney General was missing. In 14 minutes, she would begin making calls. In 15 minutes, the truth would begin to emerge, and Thomas Mitchell's world would come crashing down. Outside the holding area, Courthouse Administrator Jennifer Walsh was frantically calling the Attorney General's office. This is the Riverside County Courthouse. We are supposed to have a meeting with Attorney General Richardson at 9 a.m., but we can't locate him anywhere. The voice on the other end was confused. He left Washington yesterday evening as scheduled. He should definitely be there by now. Walsh felt a growing sense of dread. We've searched the entire building. The only unusual thing this morning was some kind of arrest situation at the front entrance, but that was just... She stopped mid-sentence as the pieces began falling into place. Ma'am, the voice on the phone prompted. Are you still there? Walsh's hands began trembling as she whispered, Oh my God. What has Mitchell done? The clock on the courthouse wall showed 8:52 a.m. In 8 minutes, the most powerful law enforcement official in America would be revealed as the man sitting in Thomas Mitchell's jail cell. And Mitchell had no idea his career was about to end in the most spectacular fashion possible. The FBI surveillance van across the street had captured everything. Every racist comment, every illegal action, every federal crime committed in broad daylight. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Justice was coming, and it was going to be swift, decisive, and absolutely devastating. At exactly 8:58 a.m., Judge Patricia Williams emerged from her chambers in full judicial robes, expecting to greet the Attorney General for their scheduled meeting. Instead, she found Courthouse Administrator Jennifer Walsh running toward her, face pale with panic. Your Honor, we have a serious problem, Walsh gasped. What kind of problem, Jennifer? Judge Williams asked, checking her watch. I think Officer Mitchell may have arrested Attorney General Richardson, Walsh whispered. Judge Williams stopped dead. That's impossible. Well-dressed black man, navy suit, briefcase full of legal documents. Mitchell arrested someone matching that description 40 minutes ago. The blood drained from Judge Williams's face. She strode purposefully toward the holding area, her robes billowing behind her. In holding cell B, David sat calmly on the metal bench. 8:59 a.m. Right on schedule. Footsteps echoed through the corridor. David looked up to see Judge Williams hurrying toward his cell, her face filled with horror and disbelief. Mitchell appeared from around the corner, looking confused. "What's going on?" "Nobody authorized access to my prisoner." Judge Williams turned slowly to face Mitchell. "Your prisoner?" "Yes, Your Honor. Arrested him for suspicious behavior. Real troublemaker." Judge Williams stepped closer to the cell, studying David's face. Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Attorney General Richardson?" she said softly. "Sir, is that really you?" The words hit Mitchell like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, his face draining of all color. "Attorney General?" Mitchell's voice cracked. "That's impossible. He's just some." "Somewhat, Officer Mitchell?" Judge Williams's voice cut like a blade. David stood slowly, maintaining perfect composure despite the handcuffs. "Good morning, Judge Williams. I apologize for the delay in our meeting." Mitchell's legs nearly gave out. He gripped the wall for support, mouth opening and closing speechlessly. "Sir," Judge Williams said, her voice filled with mortification, "I am deeply sorry for this treatment. This is absolutely unacceptable." "Judge Williams," David replied calmly, "would you please have Officer Mitchell remove these handcuffs?" "Officer Mitchell!" "Remove those handcuffs immediately." Mitchell's hands shook violently as he fumbled for his keys. They clattered to the floor twice before he managed to unlock the cell and approach David with trembling fingers. "Sir, I didn't know." Mitchell stammered as he worked the cuffs. "You don't look like... I thought you were..." "I was what, Officer Mitchell?" David's voice remained steady, but his eyes were steel. "I made a mistake," Mitchell whispered, the handcuffs finally clicking open. "A mistake?" David rubbed his wrists. "You called me street trash and garbage. You said I crawled out of a sewer. Was that also a mistake?" Mitchell backed away as if David might strike him. "Sir, please, I have a family. 20 years of service. I didn't mean..." "You didn't mean what, exactly?" David stepped out of the cell, his presence filling the corridor. "You didn't mean to violate my civil rights? You didn't mean to illegally arrest the Attorney General of the United States?" Judge Williams watched in stunned silence as the magnitude became clear. The nation's top law enforcement official had been racially profiled and arrested. "Sir," Judge Williams said quietly, "how can we possibly make this right?" "Judge Williams, this represents exactly why I came here today." David's voice carried federal authority. "We've received 47 civil rights complaints about this courthouse. Today, I experienced what those complainants endured." Mitchell's face went gray. 47 complaints? You were investigating us? "I was letting you reveal yourself completely, Officer Mitchell." David turned to Judge Williams. "I need all security footage preserved immediately." "Already being done, sir," Judge Williams replied. Mitchell realized the scope of his situation. The cameras recorded everything? "Every word, every action, every federal crime you committed," David confirmed. Rodriguez appeared, drawn by the commotion. When he saw David free and Mitchell cowering, he understood immediately. "Oh, God, Tom," Rodriguez whispered. "What have you done?" Judge Williams spoke into her radio. "I need Chief Morrison and FBI Agent Morrison here immediately. The Attorney General requires assistance." Mitchell collapsed against the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor. "FBI? Federal charges? My pension." "Officer Mitchell," David said, looking down at the broken man, "you should have thought about your family before treating me like an animal based on my skin color." Footsteps approached. Chief Morrison rounded the corner, took one look, and immediately understood his department faced its biggest crisis ever. "Attorney General Richardson," Chief Morrison said, his voice thick with dread. "Sir, I apologize for this unconscionable treatment." "Chief Morrison, your apology is noted. But apologies won't fix a system that allowed this for 20 years. Mitchell looked up, tears streaming. 20 years? 20 years of complaints, Officer Mitchell. 20 years of victims. 20 years of the exact behavior you demonstrated today. David's voice was implacable. And now, 20 years of consequences. Sirens wailed as FBI vehicles approached the courthouse. Mitchell's reign was ending, and federal justice was beginning. The most ironic arrest in American history had become the most devastating reversal of fortune imaginable. FBI agent Sarah Morrison burst through the courthouse doors, her team behind her in tactical gear. The surveillance van had captured everything, and now federal law enforcement was taking control. "Attorney General Richardson," Agent Morrison called out as she approached. "Sir, are you injured? Do you require medical attention?" David straightened his suit jacket, his composure unshaken despite the ordeal. "I'm fine, Agent Morrison. But I need Officer Mitchell placed under federal arrest immediately." Mitchell scrambled to his feet from where he'd been sitting against the wall. "Federal arrest? Please, sir, I made a mistake. I'm sorry." Agent Morrison turned toward Mitchell, her expression cold and professional. "Thomas Mitchell, by authority of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, you are under arrest for violation of civil rights under color of authority." "No, no, no," Mitchell pleaded, backing away. "This is all a misunderstanding." "I didn't know who he was." "The fact that you didn't know his identity makes it worse, not better," Agent Morrison replied, producing federal handcuffs. "You violated his rights because of his race." Chief Morrison stepped forward, his face ashen. "Agent Morrison, will cooperate fully with your investigation. Officer Mitchell is suspended without pay effective immediately." "That's not enough," David interjected. "Chief Morrison, how many other complaints has your department received about Officer Mitchell?" Chief Morrison's shoulders sagged. "Sir, I'll need to review our files, but there have been incidents over the years." "Incidents?" David's voice sharpened. "Agent Morrison, what did your preliminary investigation reveal?" Agent Morrison consulted her tablet. 17 formal complaints filed against Officer Mitchell in the past 5 years alone, all dismissed or downplayed by Internal Affairs. The hallway fell silent except for Mitchell's labored breathing. 17 complaints meant 17 victims whose civil rights had been violated while the system protected their abuser. 17 people, David said quietly, experienced what I just experienced. But unlike me, they had no power to fight back. Mitchell tried one more desperate plea. "Sir, I have a wife. 2 kids in college. Please, I'll do anything to make this right." David looked at Mitchell with no trace of sympathy. "Officer Mitchell, where was your concern for families when you were humiliating fathers in front of their children? Where was your compassion when you were terrorizing mothers trying to access justice?" Judge Williams approached cautiously. "Attorney General Richardson, what can this courthouse do to ensure this never happens again?" "Judge Williams, this goes beyond one courthouse. Agent Morrison, I want a full federal investigation of this entire county's law enforcement practices." "Already initiated, sir," Agent Morrison confirmed. "We'll be interviewing every complainant and reviewing 20 years of incident reports." Rodriguez stepped forward nervously. "Sir, I need to confess something. I witnessed Officer Mitchell's behavior many times and never reported it. I was wrong to stay silent." David studied Rodriguez carefully. "Officer Rodriguez, your silence enabled these violations. But your willingness to speak up now shows you understand the gravity of the situation." "What happened to him?" Rodriguez asked, nodding toward Mitchell. "Officer Mitchell faces federal charges carrying up to 10 years in prison," Agent Morrison explained. "Civil rights violations under color of law are serious federal crimes." Mitchell's knees buckled. 10 years? Federal prison. My life is over. Your life isn't over, David corrected. But your career in law enforcement is finished forever. You'll never wear a badge again. Chief Morrison cleared his throat. Sir, what reforms do you recommend for our department? Comprehensive civil rights training for every officer, civilian oversight board with federal authority, body cameras for all personnel, reviewed weekly. David's tone brooked no argument. And zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior. News reporter Susan Carter appeared with her cameraman, having been escorted inside by FBI agents. Attorney General Richardson, can you comment on what happened here today? David turned toward the camera, his bearing dignified despite his disheveled appearance. What happened here today illustrates exactly why the Department of Justice takes civil rights violations seriously. No American should face what I experienced based on their race. Will there be federal charges? Carter asked. Officer Mitchell will face the full force of federal law. This behavior violated not just my rights, but the constitutional rights of every American. Mitchell was led away in federal handcuffs, his 20-year career ending in the most humiliating way possible. Other courthouse employees watched in stunned silence as their colleague became a federal prisoner. Agent Morrison, David continued, I want every victim of Officer Mitchell's abuse contacted immediately. They deserve to know that justice is finally being served. Already in progress, sir. We've identified 23 individuals who filed complaints over the years. The magnitude was staggering. 23 people had experienced racial profiling and abuse while the system failed them completely. This courthouse will become a model for civil rights protection, David announced. What happened here today will never happen again, anywhere in America, if I have anything to say about it. As Mitchell disappeared around the corner in federal custody, his victims finally had their vindication. The system that had protected him for 20 years had just delivered the ultimate justice. Federal consequences for federal crimes. Swift, decisive, and absolutely final. 6 weeks later, the federal courthouse in Los Angeles buzzed with unprecedented media attention. The United States versus Thomas Mitchell had become the most closely watched civil rights case in years. Federal District Attorney Rebecca Torres stood before a packed courtroom, her voice carrying the weight of constitutional authority. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case represents everything wrong with unchecked power and systematic racism in law enforcement. The prosecution table was loaded with evidence. Security footage from multiple angles, cell phone videos from 47 witnesses, FBI surveillance recordings capturing every racist comment. 20 years of complaint files that had been buried by a corrupt system. Mitchell sat at the defense table looking haggard and defeated. His expensive attorney had tried everything to minimize the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Your Honor, Torres continued, the defendant didn't just violate Attorney General Richardson's civil rights. Our investigation revealed a 20-year pattern of systematic abuse against minority citizens. Judge Robert Carter presided over the federal trial with stern authority. Counselor, please present your evidence to the jury. The first piece of evidence was the security footage from that morning at Riverside County Courthouse. The jury watched in stunned silence as Mitchell called David garbage and street trash before illegally arresting him. Several jurors shook their heads in disgust. The racist language was undeniable, captured in high definition for federal court. Now, Torres said, let's hear from the other victims who weren't fortunate enough to be the Attorney General. Maria Santos took the witness stand, her voice steady but emotional. Officer Mitchell subjected me to racial slurs every time I appeared in court. He called me illegal and questioned my right to practice law despite being born in California. Dr. James Washington followed, describing 6 illegal traffic stops in 2 years. Mitchell searched my car every time, claiming I fit a description. He never found anything because I had done nothing wrong. He targeted me because I was a successful black man driving through his county. Dr. Keisha Johnson's testimony was particularly damning. Mitchell questioned my medical credentials in court, demanding proof I was a real doctor. He treated me like a fraud until the judge intervened. The pattern was clear and systematic. Mitchell had targeted minorities for 20 years while the system protected him. When David took the witness stand, the courtroom fell completely silent. Here was the nation's top law enforcement official describing his own violation at the hands of a racist cop. Officer Mitchell didn't see a fellow American that morning, David testified. He saw a threat to his worldview. He saw someone who, in his mind, didn't deserve basic human dignity. "How did this incident affect you personally, Mr. Attorney General?" Torres asked. "It reminded me why civil rights enforcement exists. But more importantly, it reminded me that without my position of power, I would have been just another victim in Mitchell's 20-year reign of terror." The defense attorney tried desperately to minimize the damage. "Your Honor, my client made errors in judgment, but he's not a racist. He was simply doing his job protecting the courthouse." Torres demolished that argument instantly. Protecting the courthouse from what? A well-dressed man trying to enter through the public entrance? The only thing Officer Mitchell was protecting was white supremacy. FBI Agent Morrison testified about the comprehensive federal investigation. "We documented 112 separate civil rights violations spanning Officer Mitchell's entire career. The pattern is undeniable." Computer forensics expert Dr. Amanda Roberts explained how the FBI had analyzed 20 years of arrest records. Officer Mitchell arrested minorities at a rate 400% higher than his colleagues. The statistical analysis proves systematic racial targeting. The evidence mountain grew daily. Internal affairs files showing complaints dismissed without investigation. Witness statements from fellow officers who saw Mitchell's racism but stayed silent. Audio recordings of racist jokes and comments from courthouse break rooms. Mitchell's pathetic attempt to testify in his own defense backfired spectacularly. "I never meant to hurt anyone," Mitchell claimed from the witness stand. "I treated everyone the same way." Torres played video evidence showing Mitchell calling white attorneys sir and counselor while calling minorities boy and worse. Officer Mitchell, was Attorney General Richardson acting suspiciously when he walked up courthouse steps in a business suit? Well, he looked out of place. Out of place? How exactly? Mitchell's racist assumptions were exposed with surgical precision. Every answer revealed deeper prejudice. Every explanation made him look worse. "Did you call white visitors garbage and street trash?" "No, but..." "Did you force white attorneys to spread their legs for public searches?" "That's different." "Different how?" Mitchell had no answer. His racism was laid bare for the federal jury to see. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman's voice was firm and clear. "On the federal charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of authority, we find the defendant guilty. On the federal charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty. On all 12 federal counts, guilty." Mitchell collapsed in his chair as the guilty verdicts continued. His wife sobbed in the gallery. His children hung their heads in shame. 2 weeks later, at sentencing, Federal Judge Carter showed no mercy. "Mr. Mitchell, you wore the badge of law enforcement while violating the very laws you swore to uphold. You terrorized innocent citizens based solely on their race. You betrayed every principle of American justice." Mitchell's attorney pleaded for leniency. "Your Honor, my client has lost everything. His career, his pension, his reputation. He should have considered those consequences before choosing racism over constitutional duty," Judge Carter replied coldly. "Thomas Mitchell, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are permanently banned from law enforcement and will undergo mandatory bias counseling." The gavel fell with finality. 8 years in the same federal system Mitchell had claimed to serve. But the justice didn't stop with Mitchell's conviction. David had promised systematic change, and he delivered. The Richardson Federal Civil Rights Protection Act passed Congress with bipartisan support. Federal oversight expanded to 127 jurisdictions nationwide. Mandatory bias training became federal law for all courthouse personnel. Riverside County implemented revolutionary reforms. Civilian oversight boards with federal authority. Body cameras reviewed by federal monitors. Zero-tolerance policies with automatic federal prosecution for civil rights violations. Chief Morrison was forced into early retirement. Rodriguez became head of the new Civil Rights Compliance Division, working to undo 20 years of institutional racism. The 47 complainants who had been ignored for years finally received justice. Federal settlements totaling $12.3 million were distributed to Mitchell's victims. Maria Santos established a federal civil rights advocacy center. Dr. Washington created a foundation supporting minorities in the legal system. Dr. Johnson testified before Congress about systematic discrimination in professional settings. David donated his entire $4.7 million settlement to organizations fighting racial injustice. Money cannot undo the damage, he announced at a federal press conference, but it can prevent future victims. The case became a landmark in federal civil rights law. Law schools taught it as the definitive example of how systematic racism operates and how federal justice responds. Mitchell's mugshot became a symbol of accountability. His federal conviction sent a clear message: violate civil rights, face federal consequences. One morning's racism had triggered a nationwide movement for constitutional justice. Federal law enforcement finally had the tools and authority to protect every American's civil rights. The message was clear and unequivocal. In America, constitutional rights are not negotiable. 1 year later, David Richardson stood in his Justice Department office, morning sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the Constitution Avenue. The document that founded America's principles of equality sat framed on his wall, a daily reminder of the work still ahead. People often asked if he regretted not revealing his identity immediately that morning at Riverside County Courthouse. The question always made him pause, remembering Mitchell's sneer and the cold metal of handcuffs against his wrists. The truth is, David reflected, by staying silent, I allowed Mitchell to expose 20 years of constitutional violations completely. Sometimes federal justice requires patience. Sometimes it requires letting evil fully reveal itself before the light of accountability can shine. The courthouse where it all began had transformed beyond recognition. Gone were the days of racial profiling and systematic abuse. New signs welcomed all visitors with dignity. Officer Rodriguez now led constitutional training programs, teaching young officers that their job wasn't just security. It was protecting every American's civil rights. Attorney General Richardson taught us that silence enables constitutional oppression, Rodriguez often told new recruits. We're not just courthouse security. We're guardians of constitutional justice for every person who walks through these doors. The ripple effects had spread nationwide like waves from a stone dropped in still water. The Richardson Federal Civil Rights Protection Act now protected Americans in all 50 states. 45,000 law enforcement officers had received mandatory constitutional training. Federal oversight boards operated in 156 jurisdictions coast to coast. One incident had become a catalyst for constitutional reform on an unprecedented scale. The victims who had suffered in silence for decades finally found their voices. Maria Santos now led the Federal Courthouse Reform Initiative, ensuring no attorney would face discrimination again. Dr. James Washington's foundation had helped over 300 minority professionals navigate legal challenges. Dr. Keisha Johnson regularly testified before Congress about professional discrimination. They had transformed from victims into voices for constitutional change. Thomas Mitchell served his federal sentence at the same institution where many of his victims' family members had been imprisoned. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Prison counselors reported he was slowly beginning to understand the constitutional damage his racism had caused. Do you understand how your actions violated federal civil rights? His counselor asked during weekly sessions. I'm beginning to understand constitutional equality, Mitchell replied quietly.
For the first time in my life, I'm experiencing what it feels like to be powerless, to be judged by others who see me as less than human. It was a start, though small and late. David's constitutional philosophy had evolved through that experience. Standing in federal courtrooms now, he always remembered that moment when his own dignity was stripped away by systematic racism. This federal court recognizes the constitutional dignity of every American citizen, he would tell packed courtrooms. Federal justice isn't about federal power. It's about constitutional equality under law. When we violate anyone's constitutional rights, we diminish our entire federal democracy. The message resonated across America. Constitutional rights weren't abstract concepts. They were lived experiences that shaped every citizen's relationship with their government. Today, David wanted to speak directly to every American watching, because the fight for constitutional justice required everyone's participation. Constitutional racism thrives in federal silence, he said, looking directly into the camera lens. It dies in federal accountability. Every time you witness constitutional violations and stay silent, you betray federal principles that our founders died to establish. Every time you speak up for constitutional justice, you become a federal constitutional guardian. The question isn't whether constitutional racism exists in America. We know it does. The question is, will you defend the Constitution when you see it under attack? The call to action was clear and urgent. Constitutional justice required active participation from every citizen. Share this constitutional story, David continued. Not for views or social media likes. Share it because somewhere right now someone's constitutional rights are being violated. Share it because your federal voice might break someone's constitutional silence. Your voice might save someone from experiencing what I experienced that morning. Subscribe if you believe in constitutional justice. Follow if you believe in federal civil rights protection for every American citizen. But the most important question remained unanswered, hanging in the air like a challenge to every viewer's conscience. Here's what I want you to think about tonight, David said, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority and moral conviction. How many Thomas Mitchells are violating constitutional rights at this very moment? How many Americans are being judged by their skin color instead of their constitutional character? And most importantly, what will you do to defend the Constitution? The screen faded to black with white text appearing. Will you defend constitutional rights? Below that, engagement prompts encouraged action. Comment. Have you witnessed constitutional discrimination? What did you do? Like if you believe in federal constitutional protection. Share to spread constitutional awareness nationwide. A final message appeared. Your engagement helps this constitutional message reach Americans who need to hear it most. David's voice returned for one final constitutional challenge. Remember, constitutional justice delayed is not constitutional justice denied. Sometimes the greatest constitutional victories require federal patience. Today's constitutional humiliation can become tomorrow's federal transformation. If one man's constitutional racism can create federal change across America, imagine what your constitutional voice can accomplish in your community. The Constitution belonged to every American. Federal civil rights were not negotiable, and the fight for constitutional justice continued, one voice at a time.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.